Very excited today to talk about one of my favorite legends, and that is the Nightmarchers of Hawaii. So, yes, that is why I'm in some tropical garb. So, I had the huge pleasure and privilege of when I first got out of college. The first job I took was in Los Angeles, and I ended up not Los Angeles, but Oahu, Hawaii, and which is everybody always asks, is that the Big Island? Is Oahu the Big Island? It's not the literally the Big Island. The Big Island is called Hawaii. It's the island of Hawaii. It's the largest by mass, but Oahu is the largest by population. It is where Waikiki is. It is where Honolulu is. And I got my start in film, documentary, and narrative film in Hawaii. It's a fantastic place to learn. But as always, as I talk about my world in film and my world in the paranormal is always just hand in hand with itself. So naturally, I'm living in Hawaii for about 5 years, working in movies, very busy doing that. But anytime I could explore the unknown a little bit, I would look into local legends, which I do that, coast to coast. Except it's Hawaii is a different culture. I always tell people when you're going to Hawaii, forget the idea that you're still in America. Yes, there might be that 50th star is Hawaii, but it's an entirely different culture. It's been westernized for sure, but there's old world traditions and cultures, and even the language. They're speaking English, but it's mixed up with pidgin, with traditional Hawaiian language. So it is a whole different experience. I would always say the only thing that's really purely American is currency. We still have the American dollar bills, but beyond that, you are in a foreign land. And one of the paranormal experiences, well, I guess I should first start out by saying one time, the time that I first learned that, yes, I am definitely in a different place is from the mainland, from America, is the attitude towards ghosts, spirits, the other side, the unknown. It's more of a matter of fact. Yes, other stuff is happening that's not on our plane of existence, on our plane of knowing. And a great example was when it was the 10 o'clock, it was the evening news. And one of their featured stories was about how the old Xerox building, nobody will rent it out anymore because, well, there was a workplace tragedy that took place. There was a massacre, a mass shooting. But that was old news at this point. I mean, that took place, I don't know, many years ago. I mean, not ancient history, but I think it was in the 90s. Very easily, you could look it up. It was Waikiki off of Nimitz Highway. But nobody, the news story wasn't about that anymore because that was old news. But the news story was that nobody will buy this place or even lease it out and move their company in there because it's so haunted. And it was said, matter of fact, the news was reporting on the ghosts at the Xerox building and that there's just too much activity for people to want to set up shop there. And again, this was not during Halloween. On the mainland, if you were to hear a ghost story on the news, it would take place around Halloween time, and by the end there'll be some tongue in cheek. We're in on the joke too. We're just having fun because it's the season. But no, in Hawaii, it was just kind of matter of fact. This place is haunted. Uh, there's and Of course, Hawaii has its tradition of myths and lore and gods and beliefs. It's just so rich. The culture of Hawaii is so deep. We always think about what poi and hula dancing, and that's about it. But it's such a beautiful culture, beautiful language as well. And the night marchers are the just most incredible concept, the most incredible type of haunting. You would think that a haunting is a haunting, that we have, the vanishing hitchhiker ghost. We've got the women in white. We've got the battlefield soldiers. We've got, your typical, and they got the poltergeist objects moving. And that will be kind of just copy pasted around the entire planet. Except Hawaii has a phenomena that is so unique to the Hawaiian Islands. I've never come across anything else like it. And that is the legend of the Night Marchers. It's incredible because it's not just one individual being marching around or making their presence known, but it is a procession. It's a parade, if you will, of of ancient Hawaiians going from point A to point B, and it'll be the worst day of your life and perhaps the last if you accidentally happen to cross one of these Nightmarcher hikes. Because, well, the stakes could not be higher. If you are caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, if you ignore the warning signs, and they do give you warnings, but if you ignore the warning signs and hang out and observe the night marchers, there's a fairly good chance that you will be killed, as the legend goes. So what is it exactly? Let's walk you through as if you were somebody caught in this wrong place at the wrong time moment. You might be out on a hike in a jungle on Oahu, on any of the Hawaiian islands, and you start to hear drum beats. You might hear the distant blowing of a conch shell. This is the announcement that there's a night marcher procession that's about to come through, and it's your time to get out of there. And you best heed that warning. But let's say you don't know, you're unaware that this is what's going on. First, I've heard some reporting saying that kind of a wind will blow through in advance of their procession, and even the branches will be pulled away, revealing an open path that of where the march is about to take place. But let's get beyond these non-visual things. The first thing you will see is an advanced scout, if you will. It's a warrior. It is a soldier, an ancient Hawaiian soldier with a spear, and he is clearing the way. It is at this point that you do not want to make eye contact. You don't want to see him at all. What you want to do is kiss the dirt. You want to get down, face down on the ground, cover your eyes, just look at the ground. And the idea is you want to show as much humility as possible. There's many tellings of this that say the best thing you could do is to absolutely disrobe as well, because you want to show total humility. And I've heard more extreme versions where they say you want to even wet yourself if you can. And chances are you could, if you were actually, the stakes were this high. You have an ancient Hawaiian warrior with a spear ready to take your life. You might just let go anyway. So what will happen next? There will be a procession of dozens of ancient Hawaiian warriors leading up to the focus of whoever the grand poobah, if you will, is. Sometimes it's an ancient Hawaiian god, it's a king, it's a chief, a female chief, a chiefess. And sometimes they're actually in the front of the procession. Sometimes they're in the back. Sometimes they're walking with the warriors. Sometimes they're actually being carried by the warriors. And those differences always depend on the personality of this person in life. So at time, eventually you wait it out. You let them go. And there's other warriors at the end. Scouts, again, with spears, ready to take anybody out that wants to then watch the procession. There's no watching this procession. In time, all the shuffling of the feet pass, and you can go about your day. So you would say, well, if this is something that happens, if there's no witnesses to this, because somebody will kill you if you happen to observe this march, this night marcher procession, well, then how do we know what it is and what it looks like and who's involved, and on and on and on? It is said that the only people that can be spared this are people who have an ancestor in the procession, and the warriors or somebody else in the procession will actually call out mine in the Hawaiian language. Of course, they'll say mine to claim dibs on you, and will sometimes even just guard you to make sure that you don't do anything, but also nobody's going to come mess with you. And then they rejoin the procession once it's over. And those are allegedly the only witnesses that have ever been able to see the night marcher procession and then live to tell the tale, which is very, very lucky that you happen to have a family member. And again, we think of Hawaii, it is this small, it's the most isolated island chain in the world. And so bloodlines run very, very, very deep there. One of my favorite stories about a night marcher procession. Oh, so I guess the next question is, where are they going? Where are they coming from? And it's always about very important sacred places. It might be a procession going from a castle or a palace of sorts to where a battle took place, from a cemetery to a holy land, but very important places within the history of Hawaii. One of my favorite stories that I've ever heard of probably any ghost story, and I'm already getting goosebumps a little bit just knowing I'm about to tell this story. It involves a night watchman who was just guarding a church at night. He was making his rounds and probably just caught up in his own stuff. He didn't hear any of the warning signs, but he was sitting in his car at this small church. I think maybe he did even hear the warning signs, so he got in his car to leave, but it was too late. The procession was upon him. And this, by the way, is in a book called the Obake Files, which is Japanese for ghost, written by the dearly departed Glenn Grant, who was really the pioneer folklorist for Hawaii. He kept so many of the Hawaiian stories alive. So the security guard is in his car. He wants to get away, peel off before the Nightmarcher procession is upon him, but it's too late. They're already there. And so he is now sitting in his car, kind of frozen. And eventually a Nightmarcher guard, comes up to each side of his car. As the windows are down, it's Hawaii, it's beautiful. They duck their heads and lean in so that they're both kind of bent over, looking down on him. And he says he is literally paralyzed, not paralyzed with fear, but physically cannot move. There is some force weighing upon him. He is trapped there. And he eventually feels a force pressing down on his eyelids to close his eyes for him. How terrifying must that be? And he says he's laying there, or he's sitting there in the car seat, in the driver's seat, and he hears the shuffling of just dozens and dozens of feet walking past the car. And eventually he's trying his hardest. He eventually creaks one eye open just a little bit, and he's able to see out the car window, the passenger side window, and he sees normal people. Appearingly, they're ghostly, but they're not warriors. They're not ancient chieftains, but they're people from a different era, marching commoners walking by, which is so interesting because, again, it's usually Hawaiian royalty, warriors, and even gods that are traditionally in this processions. So eventually, the procession finishes. The two guards, they inch their way back out of his car, and they rejoin, and he gains the power to move once again. And of course, he puts it into gear and hightails it the hell out of there. Calls into work sick the next day. You would think he would call in, I'm never ever coming back. But he just takes the next day off and then dives into research. He knows that this procession was coming from behind the church, which is just jungle. It's just wild area. What in the world are they coming from? And he ends up finding out that there was an ancient cemetery back there, and they were moving in the direction of where there was a major plantation. So it's very interesting. It's kind of like these people, they weren't, revered warriors that are going to reclaim or relive their time in battle or something like that. They are literally just doing their jaunt to work, which is very fascinating. And I hope to have more updates on the Nightmarchers. Oh, actually, I want a small aside. One of my really good friends, Travis Cameron, he and his family owned a house up in Laie, which is on the north, getting towards the northeast-ish side of the island of Oahu. And they had this incredible old canyon, just rock canyon, very enclosed, especially with the plant life overhead. It felt more like a cave than a canyon. Beautiful area, and right up the property went right up to the beach. And they would host they had a big family. So there, many of the kids, the boys were in Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, and all that kind of stuff. And they would do campouts in this area. And sometimes kids would report odd things happening there. And some of them just would refuse. Like they just got a bad vibe as soon as they got in the area, and would just not. I'll take a pass on this merit badge. And apparently one of the fathers of one of these kids in the Cub Scout troop had this old map of known Nightmarcher areas, walking points, and this canyon was on that list, was on that map. And I've never been able to find anything that mapped out exactly where the Nightmarchers are going and coming from, but I would love to see something like that. So I suppose this is a call out there, and not for me, but for the world, to share it on whatsyourghoststory.com, because that's what we're all about, is sharing information. And I would love to see that. I would love to share that. I happened to stumble across at a garage sale this old book. It's actually not, I mean, it's old, but it's not as old. It looks ancient, but it's an entire book on the Nightmarchers. So I am very much looking forward to digging into this. Maybe a future blog post on whatsyourghoststory.com will do a review of this book and recount some of the tales. 1976 is the publication date, and apparently the author of this book passed away after turning in the manuscript and before the book came out, which is very unfortunate. But we will carry on the good work of Helen Hoyt, who was the one that wrote this book. Anyway, so we have a lot of fun things coming up in the future of this. We are doing the Paranormal A to Z, part of the A to Z challenge, where we're taking a different paranormal topic from the letter A through the letter Z. And tonight was Nightmarchers, and we'll be talking about orbs and paranormal conferences and the Queen Mary and residual hauntings. There's a lot of really fun things coming up. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, hit the bell button if you want to make sure you know when the next time is I'm going live. We'll be doing a couple a day, a few times coming up. And please do share this. That's what this whole community is about. It's sharing information. So if you know somebody that likes ghost stories or likes Hawaii lore, folklore, or specifically the Nightmarchers, which again is one of my favorite types of ghost stories, please do share this out there. It is very much appreciated. And until next time, I always do want to know, what is your ghost story?